26, okay, 26. Right, any other?
40.
40? 60? Okay, right. Right, 80. Right, let's go for the first one. Just to keep you in suspense. Okay, the first one. The most accurate figure we have is from the census. That's the only national survey. Now, it's quite old now, 2001. But I have been in many organizations, government bodies, where they think there are more than 5 million Muslims. The actual figure that we have is 1.6. Now, current estimates are around about 2.3 million. But the only confirmed figure we have, where it goes to every household, is 1.6 million. So not bad. Only 2% of the households are Muslim households. It's 1.9%, so it's just under 2. Now, in the majority of government bodies that I've spoken to, most people think the figure is something like 10%. Some people in other organizations and in working groups, members of the public, have this impression that Muslim households are as high as 20%. Only the other day, I was sitting with somebody who was in charge of the local council's frontline communications, who swore to me that she thought 35% of all households were Muslim households. What it shows us is the power of perception. Next one. We make up less than a quarter of the world's Muslims. Less than a quarter. According to the Pew Study research, we make up less than 0.1%. But it's probably higher than that now. But it's less than a quarter. It's very small. Over a third of British Muslims are Londoners. Over a third. So just under a half live in London. All seats had Muslim voters. This was a surprise find for myself as we did our research. It's a real positive for our democracy, actually. It shows a spread. Of course, the numbers vary, but in every seat, which means in the remotest seats, there are a minimum of 30 voters across England and Wales. Okay, just some statistics in terms of the makeup. 2.7% of Britain is Muslims, and some of the other major groups. But we are a young social demographic group. Yes, I mean it's fairly standard information. You can just go back to it, but it shows us the rough makeup of religious affiliation in the United Kingdom. And by and large, most people identify themselves as Christians. That is what they identify themselves as. It doesn't mean that they're flocking churches, but it does mean that if you are seen to threaten that, then it does bring about that identity, that Christian identity will be asserted. I say that because sometimes we talk in very condescending terms when we don't realize it about Christianity, as if it's just dead. And that's always a mistake. But we're a young social group. Nearly a third of us are under the age of 16. Just under half of us are under the age of 25, which means that quite naturally our numbers will increase as we get married and have children. So the numbers will increase, not because of migration, which is what the Daily Express will want you to believe. It's just because of the natural growth of our communities. And just a comparator there of age. Now, if you look at the Muslim figures, which are on the right, the first two columns show the 0 to 15 and the 16 to 24-year-olds. And you can see how, compared to the wider population, we are a younger group. Okay, now these are quite topical issues. And I really just want to touch on them, given that the time that we had, but often we talk about integration. But there are different forms of integration. Legal integration in terms of legal right and having your legal rights. In that sense, we are fully integrated. There's political integration, both in terms of your political participation and your makeup. What could be more integrated than all 570 seats having a noticeable number of Muslims? Over 240 seats have a population base of 1,000 or more. 240 of those 570 seats had a local population base of 1,000 or more. Then there's social integration, and perhaps that's where what the issue is for lots of people. It's about understanding and being comfortable with cultural dynamics. What do we mean by Muslim identity? And often I think this is quite an artificial construct. When you think of early Islam, there was no differentiation between belief and culture, because everybody was an Arab, and it was within an Arab context that a call was made to God. Now we have these questions, and these are burning questions for second generation and third generation migrants generally. How do I identify myself? But sometimes in trying to identify yourselves, we can sometimes assert things that may be quite unnatural, but it's a phase that we're going through. So maybe this zeal in wanting to have a Muslim or an Islamic of everything will subside with time and with later generations. What do we mean by British? We're not really clear about that either in this country. You get a sense that when the Prime Minister of the country is asking questions about what is Britishness, maybe as a nation we don't properly know. And often there's a political speak against what you would call a naturally occurring integration. We are very much part of the fabric across different layers. But there are tensions and fears within, and sometimes these fears are fears that we have amongst ourselves. Fears perhaps that are driven by that political speak, that make us threatened, fears of what assimilation really means. But also, I'd like to say, things don't move that fast. So in South Africa, Muslims have been there for centuries. By and large, we've just been here for 30 or 40 years, and I think we expect change very quickly. We'll just flick through these, but it's not very happy reading, I'm afraid. My work is social policy research, and it's about facts as well. And generally speaking, there are great levels of inequity that we can find amongst Muslims. I want you to have a look at the Pakistani and Bangladeshi figures, which represent the largest groupings of Muslims. So disadvantaged in terms of housing, next slide. Unemployment, in the middle there, Pakistani and Bangladeshi there. Low income levels, we've got Pakistani and Bangladeshi figures there. These are taken from the census 2001. Income source, showing disadvantaged levels there as well. Health, the standardized risk ratio, you can have a look at the Pakistani and Bangladeshi figures there. So not a very good picture. Now, in super fast fashion, there's a pre-war Muslims history that's very, very interesting. And then you have the post-war migration, where people were coming on a voucher scheme to rebuild Britain after the war. The 1948 Nationality Act allowed that. And then the 1962 Immigration Act really changed things. But it changed Muslims from